Good afternoon. I want to tell you a little bit about what we refer to as big bears at our company. So how we use cloud and our cloud infrastructure to gain the trust of our customers. So first, a little bit about myself. I've been a sysadmin for over 15 years. I like to know what's happening with our systems, and I like to know why. Over those years, tech has really changed. So when I started, we've kind of mentioned this earlier, we'd go out and buy a server, we'd install a CD into it, we would build a Snowflake server. It would be pretty much unique. It's kind of got to the point now where I'm probably never going to see a physical server again. And in many ways, I'm kind of pleased. I spent a lot of time in data centers, so it's quite nice not to have to go to those anymore. Over the years, I've worked at an ad company, so we had hundreds of servers there running across multiple locations. And we had to deal with SOX requirements there, so there was always a demand to explain kind of what was happening and why, and to be accountable for what was going on there. Since then, I've moved to an energy company in the UK here. At our time there, we saw some really rapid growth. In one weekend, we doubled in size, for example, and we continued that growth rate over the following weeks, and it was pretty exciting. But again, we had to answer kind of license requirements. We had Ofgem license to deal with, so we had to be accountable for what we were doing. We also went through an ISO 27001 process there, so it was really explaining and kind of proving that we had a reason for doing things. Now I'm a wealth wizard. So what do wealth wizards do? We are an award-winning FCA-regulated provider of financial advice. We're trying to shake up the industry a little bit, so I don't know how many of you will have seen a financial advisor, but you probably know that it takes weeks to get advice around your finances. At the moment, we concentrate on pensions and retirement, but we're doing something which is known as robo-advice in the industry. So we take the advice that chartered advisors would give, and we distill it down into algorithms, and we put that into software. And we provide this software as a service to customers, both as a kind of an HR benefit, but also as a white label product. So we offer this as a software as a service. In doing this, in order to provide this advice, we hold some of our customers' clients' most sensitive data. So security is a big concern for us. I should also add we're a small, fast-moving company. There's about 60 of us. We're an agile company, and I don't just mean an agile development team. We're actually agile as a company. The whole company recognizes these kind of 2-week sprint cycles. But we're trying to work in a world of really big companies, say big bears as we like to refer to them, where it can take them years to sign up to contracts. So again, there's an awful lot we have to go through to build trust with those customers and prove to them that what we do is secure. So again, due to the FCA and kind of financial advice is very heavily regulated. We have to be able to prove why we gave some advice, when we did it, what was the information that led to that advice. There's an awful lot of questions that we have to answer. There's an awful lot of audits we have to deal with. So we have problems like privacy, data retention, and also tidying up that data. So if a customer says, what data do you hold on me? I want you to remove it. We have to be able to do that. So we've got to have a good idea what we have, where, and why. We have to be accountable for everything we do, not just at an operational level, not just for the software that's being deployed, the systems that are built, but the advice we're giving. So, it's all really important to have that audit trail of everything we do. And of course, things like data security. Actually encrypting that data, making sure that the communication channels are encrypted so that no one else can get to that data. We're cloud wizards. We've always been cloud-based, so we haven't had a cloud migration journey. And when I started there, I wasn't at all surprised to see that we were a cloud-based company. We're new, and why wouldn't we be? I mean, there's been a huge increase in cloud computing over the last 10 years. It was kind of virtualization 10 years ago and 5, and now it's really just cloud computing. We haven't run a VMware cluster, which is probably what many people have done. We've just gone straight to cloud. In fact, we're on our 3rd iteration of our platform. We've gone from a managed service world, so we were kind of buying a virtual server with somebody, through to much more of a managed cloud environment, so a bigger system, but it was still kind of very much handheld through that. We're now really a cloud-native company, so we use AWS, and we are, we completely embrace the benefits of the cloud. Most of our server compute instances are ephemeral, so we can delete them, they'll get re-provisioned, service will not be interrupted, we can lose servers and they'll come back, or replacements will come back up within minutes, and we'll be up and running. We don't have that downtime through the loss of hardware in the way that we would have in a traditional world. So what are the benefits of cloud beyond that? So we find that it's more flexible. The APIs that cloud offers us allow us to program how we use it. And arguably, we find cloud more secure than a traditional environment. So why do we find it more flexible? So we're a SaaS platform. We have to be able to scale rapidly to suit our customer need. I don't want to be going out and buying 10 cabinets, only for 5 of those cabinets in a co-location to be sitting empty most of the time, or all 10 of them to be full and have nowhere to expand into. So we don't have that problem in cloud. We also have, the nature of what we do is that our demand is very peaky. So no one really goes and looks at their pension that often. Often people will come back maybe at the end of a salary review. So these are kind of yearly cycles a lot of the time. So 90% of the time, a customer won't be looking at our system. When they do, all of the clients in that business come and look at our system at the same time. So we have to be able to scale very rapidly to meet that. Again, cloud is ideal for doing this. I don't want to pay for things I'm not using. And I don't want the finance director asking me why we're paying for things we're not using. And equally, I don't want to run out of space. So cloud works really well for this. As we've kind of mentioned, this has come up several times today, the cloud is programmable. There are APIs for doing pretty much everything you want to in the cloud. Because APIs are programmable, it allows us to automate pretty much everything we do. This saves time and money, but it brings us control. And by doing that, we have audit trails. So the automation allows us to prove what we did, why we did it. Using tools like Terraform and Puppet, we can also put all of those things through a version control system. And we can get our peers and our managers to approve those changes before they happen. Again, these are things that auditors love to see. They love to see a reason for something happening. And we get a lot of auditors coming and seeing us. So the programmability of the cloud is a huge benefit for us. And this allows us to build up trust with those customers. Finally, it's more secure. We find it is more secure. And when I talk about security, I look at the 3 tenets of it. So there's confidentiality and integrity and availability. Now, the cloud, and we're using AWS in this case, it really encourages you to build your systems to be more highly available. Everywhere you look in the AWS architecture, guys, they'll suggest you use multiple availability zones. In a traditional co-located environment, I would have to go to the trouble of having 2 physical data centers to do this. It's so much easier for us to do this in the cloud. Again, we just choose which availability zone to deploy into. As I've mentioned before, there's much, much higher capacity there. We don't have to worry about running out of space. Things like encryption are much easier for us in the cloud. So now it's just a checkbox. I don't have to worry about configuring our SAN to do things or getting the operating system to encrypt the things. I can literally just check a box on the provisioning. Or more to the point, put this into our code. So we request encrypted volumes. Now this means our data at rest is encrypted. We also kind of get questions from auditors around, well, if you're in the cloud, who else is running on that hardware? How can you guarantee that all the data there is safe? So again, now we have the option to buy dedicated hardware or to rent dedicated hardware in the cloud. We've not had to yet, which has been great for us, but we know we have that option there, so that's good. There's also a lot of questions around keys. So again, if you're working in the cloud and you're encrypting things, who has access to those keys? So things like AWS, KMS mean that we know that we can keep those keys safe and secure and only accessible by us. So we can answer those questions easily. One of the huge benefits of cloud for us is the vendor integration. So again, Because things are API-driven, and particularly with AWS, because it's basically a de facto standard, there are lots and lots of people out there that can come and help you. There are lots of tools we can use. So, of course, we're using alert logic there, but there's a lot of other things we can get as well. We can get analysis of our CloudTrail logs. We can get a lot of expertise out there. You know, there's so many experts available on the best way to optimize your AWS environment. Again, if I was running internally, somebody would have to come in that have to understand our custom environment. By running in this kind of standardized AWS world, it's much easier to get that advice. Okay, so a little bit about our tech. So we're using a fully automated build pipeline. We're using cutting-edge, bleeding-edge technology in places. So, yeah, we get very fast delivery of code, but we've got to really understand the technologies that allow us to deliver that. So it means we want to focus on that, on those technologies. We have a microservice architecture which allows for frequent small changes. So we'll have several releases a week. We will package that code into Docker containers, and we will then use a Kubernetes cluster to deliver that code. Now, Kubernetes it's a great piece of software. It's actually written by Google and then given to the community. Kubernetes takes care of things like making sure we have enough instances running, making sure that application's available. You know, it does a lot of things for us, but again, we've got to learn how to use it. Of course, all this complexity means that we can't really do this by hand. We can only automate this. There's too much going on for us to try and manage this in a manual way. So we have to automate. But again, cloud allows us to do that, not just at the software layer, but right down through to the infrastructure. And I should add, using tools like this is not, you know, they're cutting edge, but it's not that scary. There are other companies out there doing this. Amazon, Google, and Facebook, we all know about those. There's banks out there like Monzo that are running Kubernetes clusters. So we know we're not doing things that are completely out of this world. Being able to go through this and prove this to our customers allows us to build that trust up with them. So, of course, we're concentrating on this kind of complex stack up here, but by being able to underpin this with services from alert logic, we know that they've got that watchful eye over what's happening inside our network. I've spent years building up monitoring systems. I've been using tools like Elasticsearch and Grafana, and while it's given us a great view of what's going on at an application level, ultimately I've still had to turn around and say to my manager, you know, if we had a data breach, I couldn't tell you it happened, and I couldn't tell you what data we lost. And I know that with alert logic, we can answer those problems. And God forbid it should ever happen, but knowing that I can answer those questions is a really, really important thing. So alert logic allows us to stop worrying about that layer so much and concentrate on this complex, but this great tech stack above it. So what challenges do we get by our customers and by our auditors? You know, they like to know what policy and process we've got going on. So we work really closely with our compliance team to make sure that our automated processes answer these problems. And so when the auditors come in and ask us how do we do things, we can show them the scripts that allow it to happen. Because everything's scripted, that gets rid of the room for error. And again, auditors actually love this, so it helps build trust in our system. When there's concern about using a cloud environment, this answers those problems. We're often asked about physical and environmental security, so I know these are kind of traditional auditor questions. It's so much easier to answer in the cloud. I don't think I've worked anywhere where I've gone to a data center and I haven't had access to somebody else's hardware. To the point I could unplug things, I could turn them off. And I know if I could do that to somebody else's hardware in a data center, somebody can do it to mine. I certainly can't get to AWS. I don't even know where they are. I know they've got a very restricted list of people who can get into there. So although we have to kind of explain this to an auditor, ultimately they actually come away much happier. There are questions around authentication and authorizations. This is really at that infrastructure layer. Now, tools like AWS IAM, they give us really, really granular control over who can do what. So again, in a traditional data center world, you could get in or you couldn't. Now you can have very granular controls over who can do what, who can access which particular service or turn on a server or turn it off or provision it. You can even put in a restriction saying, well, they're allowed to do things, but they've got to explain why they're doing them. So again, these kind of really play into the hands of auditors, and it's a brilliant thing there. Questions around backup, monitoring, availability, logging, they all become so much easier to answer. So I can take snapshots of machines. I can allow Amazon to manage the retention policy of those snapshots. These are things that would probably take me weeks to get set up in my traditional environment. There are lots of off-the-shelf monitoring tools. I can use AWS CloudWatch. I don't have to go and build my own monitoring tools anymore. So, these are all things that over the years I've kind of quite enjoyed doing, but I appreciate not having to do them anymore because it means I can go and concentrate on things that really matter to me as an operations manager and to the business about being able to deliver our product quickly and efficiently. There's questions around separation of concerns, particularly in our automated delivery pipeline. So an auditor will ask, how can you get code written and ensure that that doesn't just get pushed through into live? So there was the example from the Yahoo data breach. The guy, he managed to steal a certificate, write code, and get a backdoor into the application. Now, in our delivery pipeline, we make very heavy use of peer review. We enforce it. You cannot get a change through our system without somebody else reviewing it. We can determine how many people review that. So, we can get that separation of concerns as part of the delivery pipeline instead of a stop gate, which kind of stops the world happening and slows down delivery. So by going back to compliance and saying, what do you need to answer, we can build the answers to those problems into the pipeline. This means we can get really quick delivery, but secure delivery that answers those problems. All of these things allow us to build up trust with our customers. Finally, again, secure data, people ask about cryptography. How do we encrypt our data? So the cloud offers lots of opportunities to make this easier. We use ELB, so we can just enable TLS and SSL there. We can enable encryption of data at rest on the volumes. There are some options around database, although we're actually running a Mongo database, so we can't use the AWS offering at the moment. But it makes cryptography much easier to deal with. There are still problems to be answered, but most of it is now just a checkbox solution, which is great. So it's not all perfect, certainly not for us anyway. We use Mongo as a database. Amazon don't provide a Mongo solution. We also can't really use a third-party cloud provider for this. The key reason being that we need to ensure that there is data sovereignty, that no one else has access to that data. We're looking at ways of how we actually encrypt the data inside the database. But in the meantime, we've got to run our own Mongo system. But we still run it in the cloud, just our cloud, not somebody else's. RDS is great. I would use RDS wherever I could. Unfortunately, there is no Mongo RDS solution. Also, our incredibly paranoid security analyst has said, always make sure you've got a copy of your backup away from your cloud provider. I said, why? He said, well, if the worst comes to the worst and AWS get compromised and they are held ransom, your business shouldn't go out of business because AWS are being held to ransom. Make sure you have a copy of your data somewhere else. If the worst comes to the worst, you can get running somewhere else. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. And a point that I've kind of always worked with is trying to remain vendor neutral. So AWS offer a lot of kind of generic services that you can really get anywhere. They also offer a lot of really great value-add services, but be really careful where you're using them. You can get tied into services, and you can get tied into AWS if you're not careful. You may choose to do that, but just be aware of when you're picking up these kind of vendor-specific services. So in summary, for us, we find that cloud has potential to be far more secure than a traditional co-located environment. This helps build trust with our customers. We get better visibility of changes because we use APIs so much. We get CloudTrail logging, so we can see exactly what happened and why. It allows us to be much more flexible and able to cater for growth. So this is kind of really important for us. The APIs allow for the right level of integration with our internal processes and therefore improve our change management and our approval processes. And not to mention, you can get that third-party integration. So bringing in services like Alert Logic means that we can concentrate on the things that really matter to us. We don't have to worry so much about those kind of those things that we're all worried about, but we don't have the time to look at all the time. Security is really important, but nobody has time for it day in, day out. So, thank you.
Cheers.